Dear students, welcome to the first lecture in our course, which is called Linguistics, as you can see in front of you. The book that we are going to adopt as a textbook is called the study of language. The writer is George Yule, fifth edition, uh, 2014. This is the edition that we are going to adopt. Okay, now as you can see that from what is written on the board, now the book is the study of language. The course is called Linguistics. Now what is linguistics? Linguistics is a science. This science studies what? Studies language. Just like any other science, we have chemistry, we have physics, we have botany, we have zoology, etc., etc. These are called sciences, and so is linguistics. So linguistics is a science, and we can realize that it is a science because it ends with the end. This is this suffix ICS, which means study or science. So now, the science or the study of language is called what? Linguistics. The person who studies what language, who is specialized in linguistics, we call him a linguist. As you can hear, just like this. Linguist, Linguist, like a chemist, like a dentist. Right. Now, let me now go directly to the topics that we are going to cover in this chapter. Now, you find these topics, you find it in your book, in the contents, which consist of about 20 chapters. Now, each chapter, the first chapter is called The Origins of Language. Now, what is meant by the origins of language is where did language come from? This is the first one. This is the first chapter. It deals, the origins of language. Where has language come from? Now, is it from God? Is it from man? Is it from nature? These things are discussed in the first chapter. The second chapter is called Animals and the Human Language. And this is, of course, is the first animals and what? And the human language. This chapter is going to be the first chapter in this course. Now, in this chapter, what does this chapter deal with? Animals and the human language. From the title, you see that we have animals. We are going to talk about animals, but from which angle? From the angle of communication. How do animals communicate? And then we talk about what? Human language. Okay? Now, man has language. Animals do not have language. Animals have a communication system, which is not, of course, which is different from what? From language. Right. the third chapter is called, deals with the sounds of language. The sounds of language. Now, when we communicate, when we talk to each other, we transfer words. These words are either spoken words. They consist of sounds, put together, they make words, and these words then put together, they make phrases, they make sentences, utterances, etc., etc. Okay, so this chapter, and then in this chapter you studied the sounds. You know that we have 44 sounds in language. These in English, these sounds are classified as consonant sounds and vowel sounds. This is what you studied in level 1 in the first year. Now after this, we moved the book, or the fourth chapter, deals with sentence pattern. What does it mean, sentence pattern? Sentence patterns means how sounds are put together to make words. Do you think that the sounds within a language, within words, whether in Arabic or in English or in any other language, they are put together haphazardly just like that, or there must be a system? Yes, there must be a system that control how sounds are put together to make words. This is chapter 4. Chapter 5 talks about word formation. And we are going to deal with this chapter, by the way. This chapter talks about word formation. Word formation. And what do we mean by word formation? This is very important. In word formation, we are, or this chapter, deals with how languages increase their vocabularies. How languages increase their words. There are a number of processes by means of which languages increase or boost or increase or boost their words. One of these, for example, is borrowing from other languages. Now we have words. We have some Arabic words are borrowed from From English, and there are some English words are borrowed into Arabic, just like this. Okay, so this chapter, the second chapter that we are going to deal with is word formation. After word formation, we deal with morphology. Now, what do we mean by morphology? By morphology, we mean how words are structured. I mean, we take a word, for example, the word girl. Now, this word, if we add s, okay, we have girls here. Now this word, we say it consists of what? A root or a stem, and this addition. This is, we call it suffix. Something like this. Later on we will talk about it in detail. So when we study the structure of words, how words are structured, how many morphemes does a word have, things like this, we deal with them within this chapter, morphology. After morphology, we are going to deal with syntax. Now, in syntax, we are going to deal with how sentences are structured. Now, these words See, for example, the study of language. This is a phrase. Now, see how we organize or arrange these words within a phrase or within what? Within a language. How do we call it? We deal with it within what? Within syntax. Okay? Right. After syntax, we are going to deal with semantics. After that, we deal with semantics. Semantics means, the word semantics ends in ICS, just like what? Linguistics. So here we also have a science. In Arabic, we call it ilm al-ma'ani. Here, what do we deal with here? Here we deal with meaning, lexical meaning which we find it in dictionaries, meaning which people when we communicate with each other, these words that we use to communicate, they have meanings. These meanings are almost known by people. I know the meaning of this word. You know the meaning of this word. What you know and what I know, it is the same because we find it in dictionaries. So semantics studies what meaning, which type of meaning. The meaning we find it in dictionaries. Okay, when we say kalimat bab, for example, or door. Okay, when you go to an Arabic dictionary or an English dictionary, that gives you what? The meaning of the word, the lexical meaning of the word. We call it, we study it under what? Semantics. There is a type of meaning, it is called pragmatics. This, after semantics, after we study semantics, the lexical meaning, we move to talk about pragmatics. Now, in pragmatics, here we also study meaning. Pragmatics is a part of what? Of semantics. But what's the difference? The difference is that in pragmatics, the meaning is not, you do not find it in the words in a phrase or in a sentence, but it is in the mind of the speaker. So you have to go beyond the lexical meaning of the word in order to understand what is the intention of the speaker. This is talked about within what? Within pragmatics. Okay, so now see, we have how many chapters? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chapters, okay? Out of 20 chapters. And each chapter, as you can see, deals with what? With a certain what? Topic. So imagine 20 topics, and on each topic you have so many books are written on each topic. For example, word formation, we have so many books written on word formation. Morphology, many books are written on what? On morphology. So is what? Syntax, so is semantics, so is pragmatic. So you can imagine that the language as such or like that, it is something complex. Because it is, so it is not something simple. No, it is something complex. Because it is complex, it needs, what does it need? It needs a sophisticated brain. So because we as human beings, we have this kind of what? Of a brain, which is a sophisticated brain, a highly developed brain. That's why we have what? We have language. But because animals do not have this type or this sophisticated type of a brain, they cannot have what? Language. Language needs a sophisticated brain, which animals lack. So from now on, I want, you see here, look, we say human language, but we do not say what? Animal language. We say animals communication. Now, before I start with the book, I want to I mean, since this course deals with language, it is. I find it. Useful or important to know what language is. And what is language? Okay, we say language. Okay, he speaks language. He speaks one language. He speaks two languages. Okay, now what is language? Okay, now what do we mean by language? Okay, language. Um, okay, so now let me. Because at the beginning we said that linguistics is the study of language. Now, I think it's important to know what language is. See here, we have a general definition of language. Later on, in the coming lecture, God willing, I'm going to give you a number of definitions suggested by specialists in language, by linguists. Now, language, as see here, language is a system. See the word system. Okay, it's very important. System. The system of what? Of communication. It's a system of communication. Communication, in Arabic we say tawasul. Nizam tawasul. Now, this system of communication consists of a set of symbols, which are sound, the raw material of language. The sounds are the raw material of what? Language. Without this raw material, we cannot have what? We cannot have language. And as well as the sounds, we have written symbols. Okay, each symbol, in addition to the these sounds, we have written symbols which are used by people of a particular country or region for what? For talking when we use sound, and for writing when we use written symbol. So now, language can be used when we talk. We can use language either as a speech or as writing. So we have written language and we have spoken language. Spoken language, we use what? We use sound. Written language, we use what? We use these what we call written symbols. Okay, this is a general definition. Now, as you can see here, that the main function of language is what? Is communication. Now, why do we communicate? Of course, we want to express our emotions. We want to express our thoughts. We want to express ideas. How do we express them? It is possible, of course, to express these things via gestures, for example, or via signs. But that system of signs or gestures is not going to be obvious, or does not provide you with the clarity as when we use language. So imagine how language is, is important. How language makes it easy to people to communicate. Imagine that we don't have a language. So how do we communicate? Okay, we may communicate by using signs or gestures, but that is not effective as when we use sounds, or when we use written symbols. Now, the main function, as I said, of language is communication. Now, what do we mean by communication? This is a very good question, raised as a consequence of this general definition of language. Communication is defined as this. Okay, so you see, back to the definition of language. You see, I define the word communication as it is given to you down here beneath. And you see, I missed talking about the word system. You see, language is a system. Language is not something, how language is organized. Definitely there is a system. It is not just like that, haphazardly, here, just like that. No, there is a system. This system is shared by what? Speakers of what? Of that language. Right. So the system that I have it here, you also have the same system. So otherwise we cannot communicate unless we have what? That system. Okay. Now let's move to the word communication. Now what do we mean by communication? You see, in Arabic when we say, let me put it in Arabic because we are in department of translation, we say تتواصل مع الشخص. When we say تتواصل مع الشخص, يعني do you communicate with him? What does it mean when you communicate with him? It means you know about the latest about him. You exchange information. You exchange knowledge between you. Okay? Right. So now, what is communication? As it is the main function of language. Communication is simply يعني ببساطة the act of transferring or imparting what? Or exchanging of information from one place, person, or group to what? To another. This is what we mean by communication. Now I want, for example, I have a pain. I have a certain feeling. How do I express it? I express it by means of what? By language. This is, we call it what? Communication. And communication means, when you see here, when we say transferring or imparting or exchanging of information, this information has to be novel information, new information. Otherwise, there is no communication. Now, if you repeat the same joke, for example, every day to be, then where is the communication? Where is the new thing here? Okay, so it's very important that in information there is the word information, something new. Now, information includes what? At least one sender, person. Just now I am a sender, a message, that what I am talking is the message, and a recipient, you listen to me now, you are receiving from me what I am saying, so we can say that there is a communication between you and I. Right. So you see here, there is a very interesting point. The point is that now animals communicate and human beings also communicate. So now, but there's a big difference between what? Between animal communication and what? Human communication. Animal communication is limited. It is not more than, for example, they need to eat, they need to, for example, drink, they are afraid. For example, in case of marriage, for example, or their mating season, not more than this. So a dog's need 1,000 years ago is the same need of what? Of a dog that lives nowadays. But the needs of a man 1,000 years back is not like the needs of man what? Nowadays. So you can imagine, nowadays we have the internet, we have the mass media. Earlier there was no. So see, the needs of man is what? Are developing, are changing. So because of this, now we have to bear in mind that man's communication is not like what? Animals what? Communication. No, they are, man's communication is creative. Why? Because what man needs is not fixed. They are developing, okay? Because they are developing, our communication, these things that we have developed, we have to communicate. But what about animals? You see, animals, their needs is limited, their communication is limited. Man's needs are not limited, their communication is what? Not limited. They are changing every day. There are new communication every day. If you tell me the same thing, just like animals, if you tell me the same thing, that's not communication. I say, for example, if you tell me a joke every day, you repeat the same joke. I say this is silly. I have what I know about it. Don't tell me the same silly joke. Okay, like this. Okay, so now after this introduction, let's go to the book and exactly chapter 2, which I told you about. Which the title of chapter 2 is animals and what? Animals and what? And human language. Right. Now, what is the first thing that you face in this chapter is the word communication here. Exactly on what? On page 12 in the book here. Page 12. Here in this section, communication, the writer, George Yule, distinguishes between two types of what? Of signals. Signals means words. In simple terms, words. Now, informative signals or communicative signals. Now, what is the difference? This is he deals with it under what? This section, informative signals and communicative signals. Now, what does it mean, informative signals? And how it is different from communicative signals? Right. Now, informative signals, it means what? It means, you see, first of all, before that, informative is taken from the word inform, the verb inform. Inform means tell. Inform means what? Means tell. So informative signals, it means signals that inform you, that tell you something about someone, but you are not interested in knowing about these things or those things about that person. For example, now if somebody is sitting in a seat and then he's from time to time or every minute he tries to move around to the right, to the left, move back. Now, you are informed, you are told by his signals, isharat, that he is not feeling what? At ease. Now, there is something is disturbing him. Otherwise, he wouldn't do that. Okay? Somebody, for example, is sneezing. Somebody is coughing. You understand from him, or you are informed that he is having a cold. Right. Are you interested in knowing about or knowing these things about that person? No. But you are informed. You are sitting near him and then you notice these things. So you are informed without using language. Okay? You are not interested in knowing these things, but you come to know these things, you see, unintentionally, unconsciously, if it is possible to use the word unconsciously here. But when we move to communicative signals, we find that here we are using language. Why are we using language? Because we intentionally want to know something. So you see, this is the difference. See, in informative signals, the person is, for example, doing something, and through these things that he does, you are informed about him. You do not, you are informed. As I said just now, there is another point concerning informative signal. Two persons are speaking, you are sitting near to them, You understand from their accent that they are, for example, from a certain province. Now, are you interested in knowing this? No, you are just hearing them. So such information or such signals which via which or through which you understand something, you know something, you are come to know about something without using language, how do we call it what? Informative signals. But when you use language to know something, it means you are interested in that thing. You intentionally want to know that thing. Okay? Okay, for example, when I ask, what is your name? Now, I want to know your name. How old are you? How long have you been here? Here, we call them what? Communicative what? Signal. So now, the basic difference between informative signals is that you are informed without using language, but here you are informed, you come to know something through what? Using what? Language. So using language is the basic difference to distinguish between what? Informative signals and communicative signals. Okay, after we have known these things, we move now to what? Because in this chapter, you see, the focus is going to be the properties of what? Of language. Now, let's come to the properties. Now, let's move to something else in this chapter, which is very important. This is what is this? Properties of human language. خصائص لغة الإنسان. Now, at the top, or the top property. See, the very nice thing to know. The top property of these properties of human language. See, not properties of animal communication. This is very important. Now, it is what? Reflexivity. Now, what do we mean reflexivity? Reflexivity comes from the verb reflect. Reflect on. Reflecting on معناتها شنو? Thinking about something, describing something. Okay? When you think about language, now this is what we mean by reflexivity. What I have been talking, what I have been saying from the beginning of this lecture up until this moment, I am reflecting on language. This is, we call it what? Reflexivity. التفكر باللغة. Reflexivity, reflecting on language. It means you think about it. Okay? Now, animals cannot, of course, think about their communication system in the same way that human beings can reflect on their what? Language. This is very important. Right. Now when we reflect on language, of course, this is the first property of language. The other properties of language, like, for example, as you can see here, displacement, arbitrariness, productivity, cultural transmission, duality, these are also properties. But at the top comes what? Reflexivity. These properties which I have mentioned, displacement, arbitrariness, are the product, are the result of what? Of reflexivity. Unless we reflect on language, we cannot have these what? Properties, displacement, arbitrariness, and other things what? Related what? To language. So here I stop, and if you have any question, any point, I don't want to say that I'm 100%, what I say is 100% clear. No, of course not. You may have some questions which crystallize in your mind later on. You can write them, and then you can pass them to me on the Google Classroom. Thank you very much, and I hope that you will, by now you have an idea about language. Maybe this idea, you do not have it before you start this lecture. Thank you very much, and God willing, we will meet next week